worked a lot on these issues. And I'll try to answer as many questions as possible, and I'll be around after if you have any more questions. Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. One, why is the EPA doing these rules? Then we'll talk about what's actually in the rules. And then I'll do some quick notes on some of the federal actions that are happening in the space that will kind of complement this work. Okay, so why clean up trucks? Okay, so transportation is the leading sector of greenhouse gas emissions in the US. It makes up about over 29% of greenhouse gas emissions. It's also a huge source of air pollution in a lot of communities, and that's from diesel. And those are linked to different respiratory illnesses, cancer, asthma, which is something that I grew up with, and a lot of other issues that make it really hard for people to go to work, for children to go to school, if they're having these issues. And specifically on heavy-duty trucks, while there's less of them on the road in the US, they actually make a greater amount of pollution, both greenhouse gas pollution and air pollutants on our roads. So that's why it's really important to address it. And I will also say it is EPA's job to do these rules. So that's just like the bottom line. They're mandated to do it under the Clean Air Act. Okay, so what are air rules? Okay, so this was actually finalized this year, March of this year. So they were finalized this year, and this is from a bunch of feedback that EPA got from both industry and from environmental advocates, and they took all that feedback that they heard from the proposed rule, and then this is what they came up with. So this rule applies to model years 2027 to 2032, and actually this is going to vary for the types of trucks that are out there. So actually in the beginning years, like 2027, this will be more focused on lighter duty vehicles such as transit buses, school buses, garbage trucks. And later in the years, like 2030, that's when this really applies to Class 8 trucks and when we're going to expect to see most of the changes. The onus of this rule is on the manufacturer, and they're the ones that are going to have to clean up these vehicles, and basically they are required to achieve an incrementally cleaner greenhouse gas emissions performance. And as I was saying, compared to the proposed rule, EPA has actually reduced the pace of improvement of all vehicle classes in the early years of the program, with targeted increases for in 2032 for some class vehicles. And I'll just say, that really comes from the feedback that industry and environmental advocates have given. If EPA only listened to environmental advocates, this would be a completely different rule. If the EPA only listened to the industry, this would be a completely different rule. So EPA did what it's supposed to do, it listened to all the stakeholders, and it created a compromise. Okay. So actually the rule is not an EPA mandate. There's actually ways to comply with the rule without having to, make fleets completely electric or, percentage electric. And I'll talk a little bit more about that next slide. But the standards are performance-based and technology neutral. As I said, automakers aren't required to make or sell electric vehicles or any particular type of car. And they're free to choose their own compliance strategies. Next slide. And I was going to add in the last slide, it's not required, but electric vehicles are just kind of like the future, and it's the direction that folks are going, and that's just why that's what we hear talked about a lot. So EPA's final rules has a lot of flexibilities, and a lot of the stuff came from the feedback they got from industry folks. So one of them is EPA has extended multipliers for electric trucks by 1 year. Even though manufacturers are already required to sell these trucks in states that have adopted advanced clean truck rules. And that's a rule that was adopted in California, and there's I think there's a California waiver for this that EPA needs to waive. And EPA is also allowing credit trading between vehicle classes, so there's, you can trade vehicle classes for a smaller vehicle, even if, your bigger vehicle is not not done, and that kind of fits into the thing about, what I was saying earlier, heavy-duty trucks emit more pollution, so they actually don't, even though they don't, heavy-duty vehicles have more pollution that they emit, they can still get credit for having it done on only a smaller duty vehicle, or a lighter duty vehicle. And then finally, EPA will be monitoring technology evolution and development, charging infrastructure, battery production, and critical mineral supply, along with many other factors, working with DOE and DOT. This is another thing that came out of conversations with industry. A lot of industry folks were worried of is this technology ready? Do we have the minerals for this? How do you know that we can comply with these things? And so EPA said, okay, what we're going to do is every year we're going to publish a report that addresses all these issues, so that we make sure that these things can actually be addressed and that you can comply with this. So they took the fears of industry and addressed it in that way. Okay, so what else is there today? Okay. So, as I was saying earlier, the market is already moving towards zero-emission trucks. Before this, Clean Trucks plan that EPA put together was out, a lot of manufacturers, had said that they are planning to electrify their vehicles. Many different companies, for example, Pepsi, had already committed to getting zero-emission trucks on the road. So this was the direction that folks were already going. Excellent. Another thing I'll add, I'm not sure if folks have heard about this, but the Biden administration in February released the National Freight Corridor Strategy. Basically, it's a freight corridor strategy with 4 phases. And the first phase is from 2024 to 2027, and it keeps going all the way to 2040. And basically, the core objective is to meet freight truck and technology markets where they're at today and determine where they're likely to develop next. And this was a project DOE, DOT, EPA, and some other agency that I can't think of right now. Work together on this, so that any investments that are coming out of the federal government, that they're going to make sure that they are putting these investments in certain areas. And Laredo was considered a priority port for each of the 4 bases. So that's really important. That means that they're going to prioritize Laredo. And there's a lot of info on this online, and I'm happy to talk about this more. I won't, talk about this too much. IRA and IIJ, as we said, there's a lot of programs that can help with getting EVs out there. So I won't spend too much time on that, but I'm happy to talk a little bit more during the panel about specific programs. And bottom line, we don't have to make a choice between clean air and economic prosperity. We can have both with electric trucks, and so that's really exciting. And I'm looking forward to talking with you all more about this.
Part of the reason that I left EPA in the last few months was so I could come to places like Laredo and help the communities where I believe there is the greatest need and the greatest deserve for getting these resources that are now available. You know, as we've heard from our state representative, as you heard from Melissa from the city council and everyone here, the future is present. This is happening right now. We have never, literally never, in any of our lifetimes, we have never had both the political will, the legislative mandate, and the money to make this possible. It is all in play. You're not yet seeing the money because the first wave of that money is literally right now, just in the last few weeks. The first wave of the money is starting to hit the street. Over the next couple years, especially in 2025, there's going to be a huge wave of resources available through grants, tax credits, rebates, financial instruments like green banks that are going to finance $100 million projects across the United States. I know from personal experience, being one of the ones that designed many of these programs, that from the very beginning, one of the greatest concerns of the Biden administration was how do we ensure that these resources get to the places that need them the most? Laredo is the personification of a place that needs them the most. We all knew, however, that from the federal government, there was nothing we could do, whether it's Justice 40 or our equity plans or the actual language of the Inflation Reduction Act, that would be able to take these resources from DC and drive them to the places like Laredo and be 100% effective. We know that that's not possible. The government cannot and has not ever effectively gotten these sorts of resources to exactly the communities like Laredo. The only way for these resources to really get to a place like right here is for all of you in this room to work together in partnership to reach up and grab it. You have got to reach up and grab it. And no single entity in this room can do that by yourself. It takes partnership between folks like you have in the room from the private sector, from folks like Roberto in the trucking industry, our folks here in the power industry. It takes your elected officials working with your staff, your civil servants in your cities, in your counties, your metropolitan planning organizations, the engineers from TxDOT. Right? It takes folks working in government. And it critically, from my perspective coming from Houston, running a community-based organization, it takes these sorts of organizations like RISC that can help to pull folks together and can help to ground how these resources are used to meet the needs of the communities that desperately need the service that comes from it. And only when we do that will we actually achieve the intent of a mandate like Justice 40, that this generational infusion of resource goes to addressing generational issues that exist in our communities across the United States. This convening is so timely because it is literally happening right now. So working together, having these conversations, thinking openly, as the state representative said, it's not about a Republican or Democrat, it's about your community and its future, and seizing this moment so that it's a better future, a healthier future, and a more prosperous future for all the interests that are in this room. It is Los Los, right? You can have both things if you work together. So thank you all so much for taking the time to be here today. I'm so sorry that I've got to scramble to make a flight to get me home to DC this evening. I wish I could be here for the two panels, but we're going to have Adrian from the Chamber of Commerce is going to help facilitate those panels. You're going to hear from a lot of these experts. We are now going to break for lunch. Thank you all so much, not just for being here today, but by signaling by being here today that you are invested in working together for the future of your community, because it will not happen, I guarantee you. It will not happen unless you do that, and everyone across the rest of the country is counting on you in places like this to actually make this a success. You are the critical piece. So thank you all for being here.